by a sphinx in a blink. You see the whole dairy stinks. Make you think about the truth. A warrior to the roots. Boots on the ground, cut the noose. Chuck a deuce out with the truth. Freedom fighters out the group, getting loose. Skywalker with the force like Luke. We need to talk to our youth. Move the change, tie your shoes. It's gonna be a run for your loot. I lose you too. This is mental abuse to a few. You start fights and you're fighting the wrong group. Just trying to show you how to move and see it through. It's about the have and the have-nots, to gain the hood and backlocks, the good and bad cops, the crack rocks they brought in. Michael Jackson and the one that's healed before him. Khalid Muhammad, the media, they don't support him. Pretend to be a friend to be supremacy. Got the tendency to be in everything. Fulfilling legacies and building penitentiaries. Hit you with felonies. The enemy been doing this shit for centuries. Too much jealousy. If you know your identity, you see that they have no sympathy for you and me. Life will take you on a ride, you gotta hold on. Things will change, stay the same, and you will go wrong. No help, just yourself, no one to call on. Go for it all and make sure you don't fall off. Once you control your mind, that's when you know the time. Just open up your eyes, get on the grind, then you become alive. Just follow the signs, leave the crowds behind, and spread your wings and fly. Life will take you on a ride, you gotta hold on. Things will change, stay the same, and you won't go wrong. No help, just yourself, no one to call on. Go for it all, and make sure you don't fall off. Once you control your mind, that's when you know the time. Just open up your eyes, get on your grind, then you become alive. Just following the signs, leave the crowds behind, and spread your wings and fly. When you're creative, they enslave it. Look in your face and tell you where to place it. Can't afford to be complacent and station. Fight it, and they already got replacement. Infiltrating race, breaking up nations, and how they using entertainment. Rappers getting whack, hip hop is coming back. Entertain and educate. Real life is punching back. Consult with other cats saying music made a wrong turn. They wanting to change, think about the long term. Watching it all burn, saying it's a small world. Got a women on back page, want to be call girls. Twerking on camera, these youngins got no manners. It's propaganda, it's just landed them in the slammer. Brooklyn's like a campus, you gotta understand it. If you don't know your way, you get left stranded. Some of the baddest landed in God's hands. God's plan is just to make you a strong man. Life will take you on a ride, you gotta hold on. Things change, stay the same, and you won't go wrong. No help, just yourself, no one to call on. Go for it all, and make sure you don't fall off. Once you control your mind, that's when you know the time. Just open up your eyes, get on the grind, then you become alive. Just following the signs, leave the crowd behind, and spread your wings and fly. Life will take you on a ride, you gotta hold on. Things will change, stay the same, and you won't go wrong. No help, just yourself, no one to call on. Go for it all, and make sure you don't fall off. Once you control your mind, that's when you know the time. Just open up.
All right, family, you already know what it is. Yours truly, our brother Jack Kemp, hailing from Brooklyn, Flatbush in the house, all the way Avenue C3, the junction, on the 2 train, all the way to the end. Our beloved, powerful brother Jack Kemp. Thank you once again for that fiery track. He got him just coming out of everywhere. The black man is God. And speaking of God, we the gods. Welcome to another edition of Baba TV Every Time Fire, and we getting started a little late, but as I heard Minister Farrakhan say one time, we are time. We are time, and thank you for being patient with us, family. Before the lens of the mic of Baba TV, he needs no introduction. However, he always gets that on Baba TV as one of the founding fathers of Baba TV, our good, great brother, Sankofa, who has a very powerful, pertinent, important information to give to us today. Shout out to Boston, always. Shout out to the mighty warriors of Boston, Massachusetts. It won't be long. I'll be coming back to Boston. Can't wait to come to Boston. With that being said, let me shut my mouth and let the teacher go ahead on and teach us, my brother, your brother, Sankofa.
That's right. That's right. Peace, love, light, and power, brother. To you, Baba, and to the listening audience, I want to thank you, as I always do, for tuning in, giving me the privilege of your time and attention on this evening where you could be doing anything. You could be watching Netflix, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just kicking back, watching a sports game or something else. But however, I'm blessed with the privilege to have your time, and I'm grateful and thankful for that. And yeah, I just wanted to touch on something, Barbara, real quick. Sidebar. It was funny, like when you was introducing me, it sounded like you was like Boston Massachusetts. You almost said Massachusetts, and it's funny because when you listen to the word Massachusetts, the first four letters Massa, Massachusetts. Boston, Massa, choose us. So Massachusetts almost sound like sidebar. Yes, yes. So we're gonna go in tonight, and you know me, I'm a I'm a militant, you know, with a sense of humor. I'm a conscious, at time comedian type brother. So you know, looking at the lighter side of things and finding humor in things is just part of my balance, man. It gives balance to my warrior system. And I'm gonna keep it that way. Yeah, it was chopping. We was chopping it up earlier, Baba, and I was telling you how I can cook. I chefed up my food and all that. Sidebar before we go into the topic at hand, which is the social engineering and mass production of the nigger mentality. The nigger mentality. All right, but we was chopping it up earlier, and I was like, yeah, I just had already chefed up, got everything out the way, about to get my workout on, get myself ready for the show. And you was like, I didn't know you can cook Kofa. And I was like, what? Come on, man. I get it in, you know? And I hooked up some baked mac and cheese. Oh, man. Came out like somebody's grandmother, somebody's great grandmama made it. Like, you know what I'm saying? With some special recipes that ain't even around these days. It came out official, if I do say so myself, you know? And it's deep, macaroni and cheese. I don't eat it a lot because, you know, the calories and every, you know, and all that. But every now and then I'll dibble and dabble and make sure I don't use too much cheese or eggs and all that. So I always make mine healthy anyway. You know what I mean? But it's interesting. Sidebar, once again, before we go into the show, I'm not going to keep the people delayed and waiting, but just I like to always provide pertinent information. So now that I did bake a successful pan of mac and cheese, you know, just a little history on mac and cheese for the people out there who may not know. There's a lot of people, you know, black people, we love some macaroni and cheese now. You know what I'm saying? Baked macaroni and cheese, not Kraft. We don't like that soupy, creamy stuff. I like that baked mac and cheese, you know, whenever I do decide to eat it, which is very on occasion, you know. But yes, mac and cheese, it was introduced to America by way of a brother by the name of a former slave. Well, he wasn't a former slave, he was a slave when he existed. But he was the slave and personal chef of then President Andrew Jackson. And his name was James Hemings. Yes. And now noodles or macaroni supposedly, you know, got its origin in Italy, you know, Marco Polo and all that. But, you know, so that's where macaroni comes from. But him being the personal chef of Andrew Jackson took that concept of macaroni, well, just that recipe of macaroni, added his own spin on it, and added his own ingredients and his touch. You know how black people we do. He remixed it, and out of that you have baked macaroni and cheese, and that's where macaroni and cheese was first introduced to America. You know what I'm saying? That's probably why we like macaroni and cheese so much. Well, it's almost goddamn baked macaroni and cheese. Let me be specific. Certain kind of baked macaroni and cheese. And it's part of our culture here for a reason. I just want to drop that little FYI. You know what I'm saying? Since we was on the topic of what I made as far as food went earlier for my physical sustainability. Now we're going to get into the food for thought for tonight's topic, for the mental satiation and sustainability. Okay? So yes, the topic is about the social engineering and mass production of the nigger mentality. Now, you know what I'm saying? When we talk about the nigger mentality, like I said, and I was dropping it last week. Last week's subject was similar because we was going into the roots and origin of a lot of our ways, habits, traits, and you know, things like that as far as it relates to us as a group. We was covering a lot of that last week. So this week is almost like a continuation because it's segued, you know, the spirit led me to I couldn't fit everything that I wanted to talk about in last week's segment. So I figured I segued some of the subject matter that was pertinent, relevant, and you know what I'm saying? I think very critical and necessary on this segment. You know what I mean? So I wanted to cover tonight's topic. Now, about nigger, the nigger mentality. You know what I'm saying? There's something interesting about the American black and the nigger mentality. When people say the word nigger for different reasons, I mean, like, let's go into the little historicity of it. We know that historically, the nigger or the N word has a long been a controversial word that was symbolic of white racial animus and hostility towards black people. You know what I'm saying? We know that that's historically the emotional what is emotionally invoked when hearing that word. What is sparked in the mind when you hear that word is the historicity attached to it originally, because now that's when the word was anglicized and geared towards us as a way to dehumanize us, right? And relegate us to being subhuman and less, human, and therefore not should not be recipients of equality. That's why we were relegated to the term and in the dehumanizing term, in the way in which it was anglicized towards us in slavery. But see, we urbanized it. We urbanized the name or the term nigger to mean something else. I mean, we've added all kinds of, sometimes it just means what it means. I mean, so many different meanings to it, but it's definitely been urbanized. You know what I'm saying? It's been from being anglicized to urbanized. See, so what I want to do is kind of go more so into the socio-political dynamics, the social engineering and disenfranchisement dynamic and foundation to what led to the creation, the social engineered creation of the nigger mentality. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, we're going to have to delve into a little, once again, sociological knowledge. One of my favorite subjects, sociology. I like to go into the science of why and how groups do things the way they do in patterns, over time and things like that. You know what I'm saying? So, and as it pertains to my people, you know what I'm saying? As a person who committed my life to researching the historicity, the greatness, the struggles, and the triumphs of our people, I find it not only interesting to me, but very pertinent and critical as a student. And you know what I'm saying? A person who is passionate about the edification of liberation information to break shackles off the minds of our people by imbuing them with knowledge. You see what I'm saying? So I'm a critical race realist. We hear the term critical race theory. We hear that a lot more in modern times than ever. Critical race theory, a lot of controversy around that. It's being banned in places and all that. You know what I'm saying? But see, I'm not necessarily a critical race theorist. I'm a critical race realist. You see, and as that's why, as a critical race realist, this segment tonight is not a critical race theory outlook, but rather a critical race realist analysis. You see what I'm saying? About the psychology as a group for us as a people. Nobody likes niggas. Niggas, man, listen. And what I mean by that, because he's like, he's about to jump in. Well, I am, but in stages and in phases. There's a law of gestation. Everything happens in stages and phases, right? But taking more of a broader scope and a more of an analytical, a socio and historical and clinical outlook on what is the nigger mentality, its origin, and why it is such a destructive force amongst us. And not only that, why it was created, how it's maintained, that's right, and reproduced towards our detriment. So there's a lot of things to cover in regards to that along different lines. We ain't going to cover every single detail because this would have to be a type of program that we have in segments that we probably even have a series on. It'll open up more for so much dialogue, for so much more people to put input and add on. You know what I'm saying? But tonight, I'm just going to add my little input on and my perspective in regards to the social engineering and reproduction of the nigger mentality. You see what I'm saying? So, like I was saying, when we say nigger, we mean it from an urbanized perspective. What up, my nigga? It's just a colloquial term that we use. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people look at us and distinguishes us as the niggas, the African American, particularly, even other ethnicities and groups of blacks, even other continental Africans who come here, kind of have this look at us like the nigger mentality. There's a certain kind of there's a certain kind of lack of discipline that this is what they look at and perceive us as having as a group. Now that is, as a group, that is, there's a certain mentality, right? There's a certain kind of ruffian energy. Ruffian's really a word now too. Look it up. You know what I'm saying? That a lot of times, even when they come here and other people of color or Africans from the continent, you know what I'm saying, that come here as immigrants and stuff like that, have an outlook on us or perspective on us or perception of us like these niggas. You know what I'm saying? Leave them niggas alone and be cautious of hanging or dealing with these niggas. We got to ask ourselves, where does the nigger mentality come from? Who created the nigger mentality? Some of us know the answer, but I want to go into a little bit more detail of how and why. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? Because the nigger didn't always exist amongst us. Even in slavery, even in captivity and antebellum slavery in the South, right? And up north, it wasn't just in the South, right? Yes, there's always been a certain kind of conditioning that was necessary, right? And it was part of the breaking process for making a slave, for conditioning the mind to be fitting to be captive or a slave. So there was always a process, you know what I'm saying, of psychological breaking, right? And reshackling of the mind that is a part of our history here. Cultural colonialism, psychological colonialism. You know what I'm saying? Intergenerationally. But then we have to examine and look at what happened, because even in slavery, even after captivity, after slavery, a generation up from slavery, you see blacks, right, producing more than what you see a lot of us doing now. This is just a generation or two up from slavery. You've seen a lot of us own more farmland then. We had what appeared to be a better and stronger family structure, better social order amongst us. You didn't see as much fratricidal homicide and a lot of the different pathios that you see plaguing us in our communities, especially over the last 50 years, but very more so in contemporary times, right? You didn't see this happen even after slavery. Now, we know that there was a lot of conditioning that went into the minds of us to make us once again able to even be fit to be a slave. You see what I'm saying? Frederick Douglass, the honorable great ancestor Frederick Douglass, once said, you know what I'm saying? The educated mind, right, is unfit to be a slave. You see what I'm saying? So, of course, there was a purpose, indoctrination imbued in our minds that deprived us of an education that would give us a comprehensive understanding and knowledge of, or deprive us of that, of self, right? And would marginalize us for success, access, and to be able to organize and do for self. But just a generation after chattel slavery, right? Just a generation after 250 years, you've seen blacks, right, producing, owning more farmland, building institutions, HBCUs, right? You had more black inventors even. If you look at just the inventions and the dates and the years that the inventions took place, a lot of that was right after slavery, or not too long after slavery, right? So we have to ask ourselves, wow, for a people that just suffered, you know, such oppression, psychological indoctrination, they weren't able to, they weren't able to marry, weren't able to own property, weren't able to raise their children, but yet and still they produced successful families, had for the most part successful marriages, were pursuing education, didn't have the adolescent pregnancy rate, didn't have fratricidal homicide, wasn't divisive and killing. What happened that didn't happen right after slavery to black people eventually, where we were so niggified? Now you got all kind of niggas, and I'm going to tie all the points in. You know how I do. Roll with me though. This is a journey, not a destination, right? It's a marathon of knowledge right here. You know what I'm saying? We have to ask ourselves, what happened? What took place that you would figure if we would be worse right after captivity? If it's a slave mentality, right? And it is. But there's layers to this. Right after captivity, we should have been the most destructive, the most divided, the most self-hating, right? Towards each other than ever, because we was right after or right out of a generation up from that kind of psychological conditioning and mental imbuing, right? That's what you would figure. But no, right after captivity, you actually seen us produce some of our greatest legacy here in America as a group, right? Than ever at that time. So I kind of want to get into the social engineering of how the nigger came about. There's all kind of niggers nowadays because it's been urbanized. Once again, it was anglicized when they call us the nigger, but we call it nigga. Tupac said this: never ignorant, getting goals accomplished. He knew how to turn the negative and turn it to a positive. You know what I'm saying? Other people use nigger for other things. You know what I'm saying? Because it's been urbanized when it was once anglicized. It's him. You know what I'm saying? Shit. I'm a nigga, he's a nigga, she's a nigga, we some niggas. Wouldn't you like to be a nigga too? You got all kind of niggas. You know what I'm saying? You got rich niggas, broke niggas, sleep niggas, woke niggas, still nigga. You got conscious niggas, you got unconscious niggas. You got on the corner and in the street niggas, and you got people up in building suite niggas, office suite niggas, and corner street niggas. You got on the block niggas and in the church choir niggas. You know what I'm saying? There's a nigger mentality that seems to be a common thread amongst us that is even permeated, even when we're supposed to be institutions of improvement for us. We got to examine the nigger mentality, but we have to also go into the origin of it and tie it all in. Tie it all in, because this is socially engineered. See, the nigger mentality is not by nature. The nigger mentality is by nurture. Not nature, but nurture. So that's why we're going to do critical. That's why I'm a critical race realist and do a critical race analysis and just instead of a theory, because we're going to deal with some facts and tie it all in and see why is the nigger mentality weaponized in our music. Why is this the perception of us, even from other people of color that come here and deal with the American black? Why is our demise so popularized? And why do we show and exhibit so much consensuality for a lifestyle, a psychology, right? And a behavior pattern that is decadent and destructive towards us? I'm talking about the nigger mentality. You know what I'm saying? Now, going back to the point at hand, when I said to give you some backdrop, it's socially engineered, because even after slavery, you didn't see black people as acting as niggers. Now, of course, we've always, and all races do, have different types and classes and categories of people. Everybody's going to have their social misfits and defects. However, you don't just see that popularized and people trying to emulate, imitate, and make this some kind of pervasive way of life or subculture. But every culture has their, usually their outcasts. So we had ours even after slavery. But what happened? What happened whereas right after slavery, right after antebellum captivity, all that was done to our minds to deprive us from liberation, to make us an indigent people, we were married more, we were pursuing education more, and we were into building and doing for self more. Part of it is because there was no integration, so we had to rely on us. All we had was us. So even, and this is tying into the point again, even though, you know what I'm saying, we were segregated against, because we can only live amongst ourselves. You've seen the black intellect or professor or physician or dentist, you know what I'm saying? Or business owner, you know, or whatever profession that they were in, you've seen that, because that's all you can only live amongst your own at that time. This is under what was called the Plessy and Ferguson Act. So after the Emancipation Proclamation took place, right? And certain territories that weren't liberated yet. It's not like Abraham Lincoln just freed all slaves. There were places already um, where slavery was already abolished. It wasn't like blacks were given equality, but the institution or the practitioner of it as an institutional type of thing and paradigm in society was abolished. You know what I'm saying? So all Abraham Lincoln did is just free certain territories, and it struck a blow to the economy of the North, which was becoming a more of a it was an industrial revolution going on, right? So it was becoming more of an industrial economy versus the South, which is agricultural. And there were just differences of where people wanted to go. And as far as the economic, always follow what happened with the dollar. Always follow what was going on with the money, what was going on with trade and commerce, what was, you know what I'm saying, the biggest thing to invest in. What was, you got to follow the dollar. When you follow the dollar, you'll see that history and politics wraps itself, and therefore sociology, what took place at that time and why, wraps itself around commerce, especially in a capitalist paradigm and regime called the United States of America. So when there was a split in the North and the South to strike a blow to the Southern economy, he basically emancipated certain areas that weren't. Even though even after that, there were still places that weren't emancipated, and there was a separation in America. In Galveston, Texas, slaves didn't even know they were free yet until General Granger went there and let them know 2 years after. This is what led to Juneteenth, Galveston, Texas. But even after that, there were territories which had succeeded from the Union in Delaware, I believe, West Virginia, Maryland, and another state which had already had separated from the Union, had become its own country within America. You see what I'm saying? Because they had seceded for the Union. However, just to drop some backdrop, he didn't basically free all slaves. You know what I'm saying? He struck a blow to the Southern economy as a result. You know what I'm saying? Because of the man. But he also said this: if I could free, if I can save the Union without having to free one slave, I would do so. And he said, nature provides. This is Abraham Lincoln, President then, Abraham Lincoln. He said, even though he is behind the Emancipation Proclamation, and a lot of black people worshipped him at that time because, and look at their condition, they felt as though that gave them some hope and leverage that they never seen happening in their life. So to some extent, at the time that they were in, I guess they looked up to that. You know what I'm saying? But he also was known for saying this, right? That if I could save the Union without freeing one of them, I would. And that nature provides that natural endowments already provide that blacks are inferior along the lines of intellect and other developments, whereas they're not fitting to even integrate with whites. So as a result, you had something called, that led to what was Plessy and Ferguson, the Plessy and Ferguson case, right, in the late 1800s, where it was a black man riding on a train. Look it up yourself. I don't want to get into a sidebar and breakdown of everything I mentioned. That's why I mentioned things, take some notes and check it out. Plessy and Ferguson, right? Plessy versus Ferguson is what led to the institution in America then known as separate but equal. What does that mean, separate but equal? You were separate, but you were equal, meaning you had the right to do for self within your own, have your own farmland, have your own schools and institutions. And this might sound crazy, but at that time, don't you know blacks owned and operated over 100 hospitals? How many blacks hospitals you can even name now on one hand? Who even thinks about that? Black hospital? That sounds crazy. This is right after slavery. This is going into the nigger because it's all going to tie in. Disenfranchisement, where's the institution? Where's the unity? Where's the cultural continuity? Where's the self-love? Where's the pride? Something happened. We had that right after slavery. I'm just laying some backdrop historically to provide some context with the content, historically speaking, so I can give you a visual, perspective that is conducive with a better understanding of where I'm coming from when I talk about the nigger mentality and its stages and phases of developmentation into the degeneracy that you see as a subculture that we relish and glorify today. So with Plessy and Ferguson, separate but equal, blacks built more institutions, had schools, had less self-destructive type of elements in the community, like you see so pervasive and prevalent in most black communities, especially in big cities nowadays. Okay. So we got to look at what happened when blacks were given certain areas, given certain land, crumbs. It was executive field order number 15, executive field order number 15, right? And executive field order number 15 is when blacks were given land, African Americans, right? From South Carolina to certain parts of Georgia, you know what I'm saying? It was given just certain area of land, you know what I mean? And executive field order number 15, you look that up, okay? And you have blacks, trying to strive and thrive and do what they had to do as a people who were segregated against. They were segregated against. This was the American social order. This was the order of the day. This is just what it was. But for people that was claimed or that was said to be inferior by nature, right? Because I'm showing you where the nigger mentality is by nurture. By nature, what they said about us is that we weren't even humans and wrote into the Constitution, right? That we were only 3/5 of a human, which is still in the Constitution, right? We proved all of that wrong because on our own and in our own communities and when left to ourselves, right? We were building a nation within a nation. We were producing intelligent people, intellects, politicians, builders. We were producing more inventors then. We had more family structure. We had longer and more successful marriages, which is the cornerstone of community. So therefore we had better community structure. The negativity dynamic that wasn't even there. This is right after slavery. So if the nigger mentality, because a lot of times we talk about the slave mentality, there are some black people with a slave mentality that might not have a nigger mentality though. They might just have that old hat in hand, bow down, yes, I'm in my place, sir, master, because it's epigenetics to some extent, which is cellular memory phenomenon, things imbued into you intergenerationally, right? And your condition and environment and access or lack thereof of certain information would make you fall right into that. And where you just have that, you might be a good dude, have a good woman, guy, whatever, as a person who may have a slave mentality, but not a nigger mentality. I actually work with some people like that are good people, but you don't want to talk to them about religion and politics because you're going to hear plantation jubilee coming all out of their conversation with you because they have a slave mentality, but not a nigger mentality. We're talking about the nigger mentality. Slave mentality is another topic, and it breaks down and trickles down into different dynamics with different people where it manifests. We know that. We're talking about the nigger mentality. Some people might have may have the slave mentality, but not the nigger, the self-destructive, just toxic, degenerative. You know what I'm saying? Psychology and mind state, which is by nurture again, and we're gonna go back. So while we were building and doing things after executive field order number 15, right? Producing greatness. Imagine where we would have been 100 years later, 150 years later, if we were left to ourselves. Just imagine things that make you go, You see what I'm saying? So that was undone after the president that came after Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson. After Andrew Johnson came into power or as the president, what he did is he started what was called the Good Old Boy Network. The Good Old Boy Network. And then with the Good Old Boy Network, basically he undid executive field order number 15 and all the progress that we were starting to make and the forward mobility that we were embarking on as a group, and the strides that we were making in the face and of hostility, segregation, lynchings, and terror, right? We were still progressing as a people, but that wasn't enough. They still had to disadvantage us. We were supposed to have been inferior now by nature, but they had to use politricks, not politics, politricks. You know what I'm saying? Underhandedly pull the rug from under us because they said, well, shit, these niggas is becoming an organized class of people and they're rising up. And, they're, whoa, we got to stop this. As a result, the Ku Klux Klan even started the year after the Emancipation Proclamation. That was 1865, 1863, then 1865, then 1866 in Pulaski, Tennessee. You had the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, which was formed, right? As some segments of it, early its roots come from Freemasonic lodges. You know what I'm saying? That's neither here nor there. That a lot of people rolled with that back in those, especially in those days. They do today too, but especially back in those days, the Ku Klux Klan was a fraternal order. You know what I'm saying? And it sought to save the South from what they considered black. Look at the editorials in newspapers back then, how they would portray us as monsters, as beasts, as ignorant monkeys. You know what I'm saying? When they would talk about civil rights, because there was a civil rights movement in the 1800s, right? 100 years before the one that we know of in the 1600s. You know what I'm saying? And they would put editorials in the newspaper of us with big lips like monkeys and long arms and short legs and talking about like we couldn't even pronounce liberation. Like they'd be saying emancipation, nation, and really putting words like that, like saying this is how niggas spell. Like in editorials, when you read the newspaper, the political editorial part, just look how they seen us. And what this did is this roused up the spirit of resentment and hatred because they seen black people were becoming a class that was competitive in this social paradigm that was still developing into what was called the United States of America. The early stages and phases of the United States, people who were just generations ago considered not human, and not only doing that, but they're successful, were marrying more than Caucasians, were doing a lot more, doing a lot better than some Caucasians who lost everything when they lost their property or lost their inheritance, which was through slavery, or many of them, because not only all of them didn't own slaves. Most of them didn't, but most of them had some job as overseers or some kind of phase or employment, you know what I'm saying, as an underling with white slave masters. And when they lost that plantation and land, a lot of them, besides losing their minds, lost their jobs too, right? And then when they seen blacks freed, a lot of them joined that fraternal order called the Ku Klux Klan to save the South, to protect the South, and to keep niggers in their place. This is why this was started. The Democratic Party of the Ku Klux Klans. That's right. The red shirts, the military wing of the Democratic Party of the Ku Klux Klan, went on a rage of terror, a campaign of terror, mayhem, and murder against blacks to destroy anything that we were working for. Because a lot of us and people say, well, slavery was the past. Pull yourself up from the bootstraps. The Irish did it. The Italian did. The Irish was considered a nigger too. He was on this, what a lot of people say, even a lot of us, and we fail to realize, or maybe are not even aware of, therefore we don't realize in totality what happened. So we don't understand what's happening because we don't really understand in detail what happened. You see what I'm saying? So by disenfranchising us, many of us moved up to the north because the South was very oppressive for us. Many of us were tricked into giving up their lands, and the land is where the wealth is at. And a lot of the good old boy network people took the land back from South Carolina to Georgia, and a plot of land that was allocated to blacks in a separate but equal paradigm and nation within a nation in which we were building, and that was destroyed. So that set us back. That set us back a lot. And a lot of us fled the terror of the South only to go up north where there was more terror, but it's just a little bit more elbow room. And many of them went up north in places like Boston, New York, Detroit, Chicago, you know what I'm saying? And when they went up north and stuff like that, now disenfranchisement is a big thing because even studies show, and this ties into the point, from a sociological standpoint, studies show that generations born or children or people born into generations of indigence or poverty, right? There's bodies of information that's still developing that is researchable and is information that's on the ground that it impacts your psychological development, certain parts of the brain or shrinkage due to indigence. You know what I'm saying? Even the developmentation of the prefrontal neocortex. You know what I'm saying? It shows that that gets stagnated. So generations being born into poverty, there's studies, right? Check it out, of how this has now. When you look at a group of people who suffered this, and it's not to play victim, it's to play critical analysis and have a critical race analysis, not theory, and understanding of the levels of the historic detriment that we deal with, because you're never going to undo what was done unless you know exactly what and how that which was done, how it was maintained, how it is reproduced on a conveyor belt, socially speaking. Well, we keep the conveyor belt going out of our own ignorance. We're talking about the creation of the nigger mentality. And like I said before, I'm talking about the psychology. The nigger was created and handcrafted right here in America. The nigger is a self-hating, self-defeatist, a type of person, right, via their psychology, that is by nurture, right, that has been developed, right, and reproduced here in America. And each generation of the nigger mentality and nigger psychology is only proven to be more detrimental, destructive, and divisive towards us. It is a cancer. It is a monster in us. Why do I talk about the nigger mentality? Why is this important? I'm talking about all the history and how disenfranchisement, and I'm going to tie it all in, led up to the niggerism, the nigger mentality, which it did. Because when you look at what happened as a people fighting for equality, fighting for self-sufficiency, just wanted to be independent and left alone, all right? When that was undone, and many of them had to go to bigger cities, right, and work and live in impoverished, extremely impoverished conditions. You should see the housing and tenements that many of the poor blacks lived in, that Caucasians lived in first. That's right. Especially a lot of after World War One and Two, and then a lot of with the influx of European immigrants to fill the new workforce and labor force for the industries that were being developed. That's why a lot of them were living in the housing developments first. When you look at projects like Queens Bridge or a lot of the old projects in Harlem, you see Italians, Irish, and poor whites, the original nigger, because they was the nigger first. They was poor. They were killing each other through the streets. They were extorting people that owned businesses and had shops and institutions. A lot of them had a higher literacy rate, a high venereal disease rate when they came here, and they were involved with a lot of crime. And they make movies about them in those times, like Scarface, not the movie Scarface, which was a remake that was done in 1983, starring Al Pacino, but the one from the 1930s, which was showing the Italian, which were descendants of immigrants who came here, who were poor, who were in what was now called the ghetto, occupied full of niggers, but they were doing a lot of the same acts: robbery, stealing, bootlegging, liquor, because it wasn't the crack era then. So the crack era for back then was bootlegging, liquor. You know what I'm saying? Before, and that's say they had the prohibition. Look at all that was going on with European niggers, which, because we're talking about the psychology, which is not exclusive to race, by the way, because a nigger is a psychology developed here in America through social conditioning and social engineering and the different social realities that we intergenerationally existed in, right? Developed the conditions that became traditions, that many of us are, that we celebrate and that we relish and that we imitate and emulate only to our demise. This is the nigger mentality. You know what I'm saying? This is the nigger mentality. Whites were in Harlem and in the slums first. You know what I'm saying? Doing nigger shit. You know what I'm saying? They were there when the first Black people started moving from the South, of escaping poverty and terror in the South, coming up north, they found a different kind of discrimination in the North. It wasn't hangings like in the South, right? But it was still discrimination and very racist and blatant, because this was the American social order. It wasn't just regional, it was the American social order, right? And going up north, many blacks are just, in Harlem specifically, I think the first blacks moved on 135th Street, right? And 6th Avenue, right over where the Schomburg Center in Harlem Hospital is at. And you know what I'm saying? When they moved in that building, it was all Jewish people then in Harlem. First, Harlem was all Dutch. It was a Dutch, area. You know what I'm saying? Harlem was separate. It was annexed to New York City. It wasn't even New York City at a certain point. You know what I'm saying? It was annexed. It was Harlem spelled with 2 A's instead of 1. And there was a lot of Dutch that were there. The Dutch aren't even here. They were one of the oldest white ethnic groups here. You don't even see them here no more. Then in came the Irish, the Italians, you know what I'm saying? A lot of the Polish and poor whites who were there. A lot of Jewish, a big, heavy Jewish population. But when the blacks moved in, even poor whites didn't want to deal with you poor niggas. They still thought they were better than you. When we moved into the neighborhoods where they were at, because they were still fighting in competition for goods, services, and resources. Oh, it fuels racism, by the way. That's what really fuels it. The pseudosciences of being subhuman was only created to basically give supposed rhyme and reason, right, and rationale for a social institution, you know what I'm saying, which was made public policy. So they had to come up with pseudosciences to try to justify it. But outside of the pseudosciences, right, because we proved a lot of them wrong, that we weren't inferior in many of the sciences and arts, even back then, you know what I'm saying, in academia and under oppression, and a population that was here, a marginalized population, an oppressed population, and a disenfranchised population, therefore was socially and politically and economically handicapped as a people, was still making strides and busting moves here. And when we moved up towards, in the North and in Harlem, once the first black family moved in, from my historical understanding and knowledge of what took place, right? Just reflecting back on in my mental file cabinet, that the white family moved out of that building. So then more black people moved in on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th floor. So the building next door to them had white folks. They moved out too. When that building got filled up with more black families, because Homestead Act, we're going to go into that. Redlining was just starting. We're going to go into that. So blacks were only allowed to move in and live in, and even if they were able to buy property, subprime lending was given to them to more even further disenfranchise them. We'll go into that. But this is what happened because the whiteys didn't want them around them. So when they moved into these buildings, they moved out. And when they moved out, many of the Jewish building owners and slumlords, right, and other people, they stopped putting money in. A lot of it was public housing, but I'm going to go into that too. The ones who owned property, let it go to crap, let it go to shit, let it go to hell, because they didn't care about the people that was there. This is how it became the ghetto of Harlem, ran down after time that it was. You know what I'm saying? After a certain time when the blacks came there, because it was a time when it was the Harlem Renaissance. You know what I'm saying? You had the likes of Ontoro Schomburg and giants like Marcus Mosiah Garvey and John Henry Clark and all the greats, Dr. Ben Young, and so many more black intellectuals and greats and poets and artists and activists were there. You know what I'm saying? And when blacks were first in during the times of the Harlem Renaissance, still wasn't niggerville like that yet. Of course, as a people with certain kind of conditioning, we've always had, like I said, our misfits, right? And our defects, but they weren't what you see now on the magnitude that we see now, that we see exhibited and glorified now and maintained, right? And recycled and reproduced now through our music, through our culture, through our art, you know what I'm saying? So back in those times, you still see us progressing as a people. But then what happened was, because there was redlining that was allowing blacks to move just to certain areas. And with that government sanctioned redlining, what they would do is draw a red line around areas that were made for blacks, because anything outside of that, and the banks and the local government was complicit in this. This is before the Fair Housing Act. This is what led to the social engineering and what poverty developed into a decadent people, right? Just walk with me. You know what I'm saying? On this journey of knowledge. So you know what I'm saying? A lot of elected properties go to shit. You know what I'm saying? It became a lot of them had lead in the paint. You see what I'm saying? Um, so which caused even later down the line, they didn't even know further damage and stuff like that. It was poverty, horrendous living conditions that generationally we started to get used to as moving up to the north and even in some poor rural parts or of the south where it was very impoverished as well. You started to see the developmentation of a so-called survivalist mindset. You know what I'm saying? When you take two rats, right? And you put them in one enclosed area, right? And they do and rats experiments for a reason, right? Scientists. But I'm just doing a philosophical one, you know what I'm saying, to put it in perspective, right? To give you a frame of reference. You take two rats and you take one rat, right? You put them in a box and just give one a piece of cheese and not the other one and marginalize it and put it away from all other areas where there's food and there's access to food and it's just these two rats fighting over crumbs and cheese, what's going to happen? You already know it's going to cause decadence. If you can experiment and do this on them over and over again, and you'll produce a certain kind of rat that is aggressive from other rats who already eat, who have access to just their natural environment as a scavenger to even go get it themselves. But if you take them in a controlled environment and experiment on them, you can even see the effects of how rats will respond and how they're aggressive because of indigence and because they're lack and because they're more competitive and aggressive towards each other because there's scarcity. And if this scarcity is purposely made, then you by proxy, right, create, right, and manufacture and reproduce a certain kind of mindset that is prevalent in society. And we see this, you know what I'm saying? Because the nigger mentality had a lot to do with years of disenfranchisement, years of benign neglect, purposely done on behalf of the United States government, purposely done on behalf of the United States government. You know what I'm saying? So when redlining took place and a lot of whites were able to move out to the suburbs and were giving machination grants, were in land grants and being able to get homes and buy them at you know at a cheaper interest rate, and we're able to take property taxes because it's property taxes from paying taxes on your homes that build up the schools, the parks, and other institutions in your community. So that built wealth. That built generational wealth for them, but simultaneously, that kind of benign neglect and what is called de facto segregation. De facto segregation. There's a difference between de facto segregation and de jure segregation. De facto segregation is when even after the this is way after the so-called Emancipation Proclamation, but then after the Civil Rights Bill, we were still fighting for equality, where state-sponsored, right, segregation imposed on American citizens in institutions of schools, restaurants, and all that was done away with. That was supposed to have been desegregation, right? After Oliver Brown versus the Board of Education in the 1950s, right? Desegregation, but the government, they were still practicing segregation in a de facto segregation kind of way. De facto segregation is when the government doesn't put its benign neglect. They don't put money into the programs, public housing, public schools. They wasn't getting any money. And since a lot of people weren't owning houses and home ownership wasn't being opened up from the banks and the lenders, the credit unions and all that to blacks because they were considered a credit risk because they were purposely kept pouring the disenfranchised for so long, right? And other racial reasons, people did not want to live around blacks because they felt though if you lived around blacks, that would be called blockbusting. You let a real estate agent sell a home to an African American, even if he was educated, well-to-do, right? Good families, strong family qualities and habits, right? They still didn't want to live near you. They still thought it was better than you because that was considered blockbusting and it would bring down the property value. So therefore, the banks kept you in a certain area, which is called redlining. And in that area, we were disenfranchised purposely. It was called benign neglect. It was the Moynihan Daniel Patrick Moynihan, right, during the times of the Richard Nixon administration. And he did a report called The Black Family. And in that report, he determined, right, that we were doing well off and better than ever, which is BS. That was a reason for them to continue to segregate against us, but by means of public policy, where it wasn't blatant and in your face. It was just done in a way where we're not going to put money into any programs and allow them access to privilege, to wealth. So therefore, the disproportionate distribution of wealth and privilege has caused the creation of the nigger mentality, which was first started in survivalist type of type of mindset, which came out of frustration, right? Indigence. You know what I'm saying? Which leads to hostility towards people that look like you. And then because you can't really just go anywhere and you're not wanted anywhere in society, it was like that and blatantly in your face, a lot of people start to feed off of their own people for survival. So you had a lot of madams popping up in the community. A lot of sisters, the profession that they were taking was sleeping with white men for money, or any men, but those are the ones who were big time spenders. Police, politicians, you know what I'm saying? Mafia motherfuckers. You had a lot of them that was big. They were coming up to the north doing that. A lot of other ones were coming up to the north and finding employment in all kind of different illegal rackets. You know what I'm saying? And extortion rings and robbery rings for survival, because access and to opportunity, wealth, and privilege wasn't just prevalent like that. Benign neglect was in your face. The Moynihan Memorandum was in effect. You see what I'm saying? Now, de jure segregation, the difference between de facto segregation, which is government sponsored, and de jure segregation. De jure segregation is like, say, it depends on the real estate market at the time. You might not be able to afford to live in a certain community. It might be gated in Beverly Hills and you can't afford to live there. It might be in Bankhead and your credit is not conducive with what they're looking for in order to sell this home or rent to own this home to you. So you can, it's the segregation by tax bracket. That's different. Or your access because of your access to capital, which allows you to be able to do more. That's called de jure segregation. De facto segregation was government sponsored, and a lot of it still goes on to this day in a form of gentrification in many different ways, which is a form of neocolonialism, It's still going on in a lot of ways, but because a lot of us are not politically conscious, we don't really know a lot of certain history or don't know it in detail like we think we do and how it still operates. You see what I'm saying? The nigger mentality is by nurture and not by nature. You ain't a nigger by nature. We're greater than that. You know what I'm saying? We have great genetics. We have great history. We come from great ancestry, and we have great potential, and we can have a great future. It's being intercepted and has been being intercepted as a group here in America, the strongest, most powerful country in the annals of human history, with a people who helped to develop and become a nation within a nation in this country. That is epic in and of itself, of prophetic proportions. That's why some people see us as the lost sheep, or a people that have to be of divine purpose, right? And have a divine rendezvous with destiny for us to have gone through the history here in this country, specifically in America, even though oppression is not exclusive to here, and in a lot of places a lot worse, but just the history of the struggle, of the conditions, of the fights, of the plights, of the assassinated leaders, of the infiltrated organizations and movements, right? Of benign neglect, of redlining, of the Homestead Act, of the Moynihan Memorandum, of Reaganomics, of mass incarceration, of the government sponsored through the CIA crack epidemic, where they admitted in 1997 to the Congressional Black Congress, to Maxine Waters and them, that they put the crack in the ghettos. They admitted that. All of these series of things that took place in society after slavery to us is what generationally led to more decadence division, and destruction. Then when the advent of hip hop, where we was using music to talk about our struggles, to party, and to bring all different kinds of genres of music from reggae to disco to rock and roll, we created all that into one form with poetry and drum that started in the Bronx in the form of hip hop. Shout out to the Bronx, my second home, BX. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that was looked at as some phase or some fad that will probably fade away these niggas in that old jungle music, even though we created all genres of music and it's always been controlled by the Jew. Rock and roll, blue, rhythm and blues, jazz. Yup. There was a time when we would make records, sidebar, and on the album cover, they couldn't even show your face because you couldn't be seen. The black face, this is in the 50s, 60s, mid to late 60s even. Not that long. It was only a few years before I was born. That's not too far before I was born. In the early to mid 70s. You see what I'm saying? So that's right. Music is used to disrespect women. They've weaponized our music, and that's what I'm going to. I'm glad you said it because I'm alluding to that point. Because now we came up with a music that talked about being socially conscious, along with partying, along mixture of different styles of rhythm and fly music, DJing and turntables. Once the Jew got into that again, right? Jerry Heller specifically, they've always had their hands in the music that we've done and controlled the major distribution dynamic and abilities of that. They've always controlled that. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, by default, slavery is a different form. There's even a book called $40 Million Slave. You know what I'm saying? About how a lot of sports, athletes, and entertainers are slaves. America's second biggest export, I believe, is entertainment. The two biggest exports is sports and music and entertainment. You know what I'm saying? Even though music is a form of entertainment, to be specific, sports and music entertainment are the two biggest exports in America. And at the root of those two greatest exports are us. We're dominant. We dominate in entertainment, rap, the music genre we created here. You know what I'm saying? And in sports, football and basketball specifically. So a lot of people that control that are not us. So that's become the new plantation for those blacks that are on there to a great extent. Now we're going to specifically keep it honed in on the hip hop dynamic and with the Jews control of that. Even before that, talking about the creation of the nigger mentality, which is engineered socially, generationally, and handcrafted right here in America, right? Now, the term nigger, right? We wasn't even calling ourselves nigger all like that. Yeah, the term nigger became hip. We was moving up to the top. Many people were becoming pimps, getting into things that allow for them to make money off of them. It just came more than just survival. Now it's a lifestyle. It ain't survival. This is the game that we chose. We players and max and pimps and hoes and gangsters and stick-up kids. That became, you know what I'm saying, something that a lot of us took onto and became a way of life. You know what I'm saying? Even though a lot of it started initially because of the social conditions, right? Right? So we've seen a progression of things happening like that. Now we had the movie after that was during that time, the blaxploitation film era was out. And this was supposed to have been movies that came out that boost and uplift the morale of black people, psychologically speaking. You know what I'm saying? A lot of movies focused on black empowerment had a social message or a positive message in it. Jim Kelly, Three the Hard Way. You know what I'm saying? Fighting against racist white cops and the local mafia trying to put lead in the local water supply. Sound like Flint, Michigan, don't it? That's what the movie Three the Hard Way was about. You know what I'm saying? An attempt to compensate for our damaged condition and material reality. That's what a lot of these movies was geared towards doing for us psychologically. So then you had, I think, Mark Goldberg, not Mark Wahlberg, or Mark Goldman. Mark Goldman. I believe he was the director of one of the first movies where you started to hear nigga being commercialized and used as like a movie that was big on the silver screen. I mean, yeah, niggas was using that, but it wasn't just like you see it now. You know what I mean? It wasn't as urbanized and popularized and therefore more colloquial, like you see it just as prevalently being used like it was now. So in that movie, I believe it was 1976. It was in the early to mid 70s. I know that. And it was called Nigger Charlie. Then there was another movie called Boss Nigger. You know what I'm saying? So instead of like Three the Hard Way and Brown Sugar and Cleopatra Jones and all those kind of movies, more kind of other movies started, and even A Spook That Sat by the Door, movies that was giving us a sense of pride, seeing us not playing buffoons and tap dancers and being stepping fetchits or Mama Mableys or Mr. Bill Bojangles Robinsons on film. But now we were strong and bold and black was beautiful and black was now and Shaft. That was intercepted in movies like Nigger Jones, Nigger Charlie. Hip hop, another thing, our creation. Even though it was partying, music, beats, and all that, we always had the b-boy element, right? That's just our style. Hip hop is one of the most it's just so dope, right? And it's the type of genre of music that it has so many different styles of hip hop. That's what made it so great and successful. You see what I'm saying? But one thing that was common in hip hop, especially then, that there was a socially relevant message always. It was usually a socially relevant message in the music. Then you had Jerry Heller, who said, you can look this up, that he was tired of hearing about the Queen Latifahs and the X-Clans and the Public Enemies. He said that he wanted to invest his money into a rap group of black people that were from the urban struggle and dealt with the crime element of gangbanging and that fast lifestyle. And he wanted to invest in that and put that out there more because he was tired of hearing about all the militants and conscious and socially relevant and aware knowledge rap. The KRS Ones, the Public Enemies, the Lakim Shabazz, the then Queen Latifahs. You know what I'm saying? Even Ice Cube, back then, he was going ham. I Want to Kill Sam. That album was off the chain. Horny Little Devil, you better back up. Horny Little Devil, you can't bust a nut. Looking at my girlfriend's black skin. You want to jump in, but she don't like white men. That's changed a lot. That's changed a lot from 1991 or 1990 with Ice Cube's America's Most Wanted album and I Want to Kill Sam. You know what I'm saying? The nigger mentality, even though we exhibited it then, the crack era came and created more social conditions. Reaganomics disenfranchised and already marginalized people even more for the crumbs that we fought for and got with certain programs and civil rights and the Black Power movements of the 70s became defunct, right? And abandoned programs or non-existent programs in the 80s by the time Reaganomics hit, which set us back generations into poverty. Benign neglect was still popping. It was very poor and disenfranchised. Minimum wage was like $3 then. The black unemployment rate was crazy. So therefore, you started seeing a lot of black men leaving the homes. Before 1968, there were over 70% of black households, right? Had two families, had two parents in them. You know what I'm saying? You had more blacks who own businesses, mom and pop shops, even if it was. You had more blacks graduating from school, college, graduating. You had less teenage pregnancy rate, less drug addiction rate, less fratricidal homicide. But then you started to see something happen after 1968. It seemed like since and when Richard Nixon declared war on drugs, that's when the drugs popped up. 10 years later, 15 years later after that, crack hits the streets. CIA admitted after the fact that they put it there for a covert war between the Contras and the Sandinistas of Nicaragua, and all that crack and the tons was brought to the Elipango Air Force Base, brought from the Elipango Air Force Base right to first Los Angeles, California. First person given a kilo of crack was Rick Ross, not the rapper, but the original Rick Ross. The nigger mentality, the decadence, the spreading of the gangbanging, and the manufacturing of negativity has been socially engineered. It's not by nature, it's by nurture. We keep it going, and it's spiraling out of control because a lot of us have not pulled out them old weeds and begin to plant new seeds because a lot of us don't know. We think this is just business as usual, and this is just life, and you about that life. But the game was designed for you to lose by an ultimate gamer, a real military strategist, a real master of deception, mass deception, weapons of mass destruction and weapons of mass destruction. This is who you're up against. This is who we are up against. And a lot of us are in the wilderness with no compass, therefore no direction and no idea where they're headed and the harm that awaits them in all flanks. Along all flanks. You see what I'm saying? That's why this conversation is important. It's not to just show my handle of history, but it is a real concern because the nigger mentality is very destructive. It's very destructive. It's one of the worst things amongst us right now. From 1980 to 2018, there's been more black on black murder that resulted in more fratricidal homicides. If you look at the numbers nationally, right, and look at the general consensus and statistics from 1980 to the more recent ones, right, more people died from black on black fratricidal homicides in our community from 1980 up to the look at the more up to date one, but the last one I looked at, it had the date of 2018. More black people died. There were more black homicides than there were bodies in the Vietnam and Korea War. We are in warfare. It's internal. The warfare is multidimensional. It's external, white supremacy, and it's internal, negativity, nigger destruction, the nigger cancer, the nigger disease. Right? And it seems like the nigger is beating white supremacy in its destruction campaign against black people. The cancer is getting worse. You know how there's different stages and phases, and we've been at war, but war intensifies. That's one thing about war. War is not just one way. War is multidimensional. War is multifaceted. There's psychological war. There's economic war. There's political war. There's spiritual warfare. And then even on that, there's different levels. There's different layers. There's different tiers. They got strategies, counter strategies, backup plans, counter plans, counterintelligence. This is what they have. They have infiltrators. They have agendas. We don't have an agenda. A lot of us got knowledge, but we don't have no collective agenda. See, when a person knows themselves, but they don't know their enemy, and they go to war with their enemy, they will usually lose. If a person knows their enemy, but don't know themselves, they may still lose a lot. But if a person knows themselves, knows their flaws, know what they need to work on, know what they need to improve, know what they need to stop doing, and start to employ and incorporate, you know yourself more, and you know your opposition because you've been studying the patterns. You may lose some, but you'll also win some. There'll be a lot more light at the end of the tunnel, and then there'll be a template, at least, and frames of references for people to add on as generations get smarter and wiser and start accelerating more in that understanding of what exactly kind of wars with us that we're battling on and losing on all fronts. Because the nigger is in the way. The inner nigger is in our way. Why do you talk about the nigger mentality? Because we have to. Some people talk about just religion, and we should, because that's had the way it was presented to us, not religion itself. Religion itself is beautiful, intention, and its essence, and it's meant to develop and evolve the human being. But that's been exploited and utilized to weaponize, marginalize, and socially colonialize certain segments of people. We know that. So we can talk about Islam, we can talk about Christianity, we can talk about the psychological impacts generationally that these things had on our minds. Some people will talk about that, and a lot of people do, and they do a good job in putting a lot of information and points to ponder. Even the people that defend the authenticity of their religions put up some very great arguments and drop a lot of knowledge too, right? So some people are more caught up with certain religions being the problem long-term of us as a group of people. That's up for debate. I don't know about that. But one thing I know that is not up for debate, I think that the nigger mentality trumps and eclipses all other problems emphatically that we say is a problem with us. Because even in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, the nigger is a cancer even in those schools of thoughts And then those doctrines gears to improve us. So at the root of the worst problem in cancer that we have, that we must uproot out of us, is the nigger mentality. It is foreign, it's not ours, and we must give it back to the sender. Most of us won't. It's fun being a nigger, man. Being a nigger's the shit. I'm a nigger, he's a nigger, she's a nigger, we some niggers. Wouldn't you like to be a nigger too? You know what I'm saying? Rich niggas, broke niggas, sleep niggas, woke niggas, still nigger. When is the fight gonna start? Many people are fighting. The brother just asked that in the fight, because a lot of times we ask questions as if we're a monolithic people, and we all do the electric side to the same beat at the same time. It's not how reality works. There is classes, groups, stages, and phases of people doing different things, different maturity levels. There are people who are actually doing it, like everything's not on YouTube. It didn't fighting. When he said, when are we gonna start the fight? Well, fighting ignorance is step one. It seems like niggas can't get past the nigger mentality. You don't want to fight no enemy when your ass is in your own way. You can't fight no enemy and win when the enemy is within, because no house divided against itself can stand. A house divided against itself will only fall. So a lot of times, when the fight going to begin? When you jump in and be a participant and be a spoke in the wheel of revolution and change heading in the right direction. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things we got to cover. Find what your gift, your passion, and even your calling is. Study in it, become adept in it, become enlightened in it. Don't just study about slavery. Don't just always study about what happened, because by proxy of that, what you do is you constantly start reading stuff, and then you put yourself under this spell of victim consciousness, where you're just great at explaining what happened. You're mad angry, and you should be. Surely oppression maketh a wise man angry. You even say that in the scriptures. That's facts. You know what I'm saying? So, get mad enough to make the change happen. You know what I'm saying? Find your calling. Read stuff that improves you, that advances you, that evolves you, that helps you with psychology, that helps you with health and fitness. Good Health for African Americans. Very powerful book here. She goes into so much. And she even has something called this. Look at this on it. The 24-week Sankofa program. You know what I'm saying? Health activism. We need a lot of that, because we're dropping more from bad health than we are from bullets. Abortion, fratricidal homicide. We see, besides just the wealth gap on a collective level, mental health in the Black community is an elephant in the room that we don't address. There's so much going on. We're just talking about fighting the system. And we have to fight on many fronts, not romantically, but practically. We need principle unity, and we need practical solutions. We need principle unity, and we need practical solutions. The rhetoric is great. I mean, we need that because we have to be inspired. Shit, the battery in your back got to be charged. But then what? Get the nigga out your way. We got to pull out old weeds and plant new seeds. Because if you don't, other people will keep planting the wrong seeds in our minds of our children and keep recreating and reproducing future niggas to come. Worse, more arrogant, more confused, more lost, less enlightened, more violent. Real super predators, nigga. Like never before. That's why it's called kindergarten. Don't kindergarten sound like a garden? You hear like the name garden. And what do you do in the garden? You plant seeds. But somebody else is planting the seeds in the gardens of our children's minds and in the minds of us as a people and as a group collectively. So as long as they're planting seeds, and we talk about fighting them, nigga, you got to fight the seeds in your goddamn mind. The fight is the destruction of the nigger mentality. There's a book called Towards the Destruction of the Nigger Mentality by a good brother by the name of C.C. Blackman. Powerful book. Look it up. Towards the Destruction of the Nigger Mentality by C.C. Blackman. Read books, not just about slavery, but how to break shackles. For instance, the book From Niggers to Gods. The book From Niggers to Gods by a brother by the name of Akil. Yeah, that's his name, Akil. Powerful book. There's volume 1. There's volume 1, and then there's volume 2. You know what I'm saying? Check it out. How to Hustle and Win by a brother by the name of Supreme Understanding Allah is ill. I was rolling in New York last spring, and I ran into him in Port Authority. I was like, yo, man, your books are powerful, man. Very sharp brother. He's from Jersey City, of East Indian descent, believe it or not. He's from the nation of gods and earth, but he doesn't just deal with the problem. He deals with the solution too. You see what I'm saying? He deals with solution orientation. Some people just deal with victim consciousness. We got to know what happened in order to understand what's happening, right? But some people are just stuck there, and they're comfortable there because it doesn't take a lot of critical thinking. It doesn't take that much as it does to come up with a solution to know what the problem is. You see what I'm saying? So there's so many things and so much we got to work on. You know what I'm saying? But the fight starts with you. The fight and revolution starts within, and then it spreads abroad. Then you fight, and you're formidable, realistically even qualified and able to fight on a political and economic level for social justice. You know what I'm saying? On different levels. Everybody's not going to be engaged in a fight. You know what I'm saying? Some people are only in it because they're, it's popping. It's popular. Black consciousness is popular now. There's different kind of conscious. There's unconscious conscious, and then there's real conscious. Some woke folks got their eyes wide closed. They're niggers. You have conscious niggers. In that book by C.C. Blackman, he has a whole chapter called Conscious Niggers. Look at the table of contents if you can, like Google and look it up. Conscious niggers. We got to talk about incentives versus dispositions. See, some people are in a struggle because they really believe in the upliftment of their people. And if there was to get some finances or have a little edge or come up a little bit, they would utilize to put their money where their mind is. They will put their money where their mind is, into things that go towards helping the advancement, of course, of themselves, but of their people where they're able to. We all have limits. That's why we need unity, right? But when a person is, I'm struggling and America hates me, so I'm hating back out of that, but really doesn't focus on plans of actions. We're talking about incentives, you know what I'm saying, versus dispositions. A person could be in a struggle or a militant because he's in a struggle. And he might hit the lottery or just might meet that white woman that showed him love, or vice versa. Black woman meet a white man that showed him love and she was conscious, more than all these hating niggas that was even woke sometimes that came at him and shitted on him and it just frustrated them. Some people are just completely fronting. You got to do that for them. They're just a part of this now. They're joining the Mickey Mouse Club if they make that popular enough on YouTube. You know what I'm saying? But some of these cats, you know what I'm saying, they get discouraged, right? And or they come up. They might come into some money, and then now they're not as militant and they're not passionate and fiery as they don't have a concern for the social upliftment of the people. The language changes. You know what I'm saying? The energy and the passion changes. The trajectory of the game plan changes. We see this with a lot of black leaderships and their movements and a lot of niggas. So you know what I'm saying? The nigger mentality has many faces. It has many faces, and it's in many places, right? So destroying what is destroying us is one of the first steps towards the right direction for us as a collective. Destroying what's destroying us, the nigger mentality, which is by nurture, not by nature, so it can be eradicated. Because if not, I'm going to say it, and I always say this, niggas will be fossils in a museum in the next 50 to 100 years, shit, probably even less. You know what I'm saying? So it's very important. Why talk about the nigger mentality? Because that's what we're buried in. If you want to dig up a body to see what caused this death, there's an investigation going on. Some more new findings have come up in this investigation. So now it's reopened. Let's look at black people. We have to reopen some cases. It ain't that slavery was the past. We need to pull ourselves up from the bootstrap. Case closed. Nah, we have to open this case and reconsider and reevaluate the anatomy of our social death, detriment, and decadence. By design, and a lot of us continue and perpetuate it, we have to acknowledge our responsibility and be accountable for our role in it as well, because it can't work without our participation. or compliance to some extent. But we have to dig up the black body, and I'm using this as an analogy. So we're not just buried in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. That's what a lot of people want to go dig us up and say we're dead from. Some people are finding life through that, or at least finding a path towards greater enlightenment through that. So I figure, what do we have to do to reopen this case of them? Study the anatomy of what caused and what continues the causation of this black decadence, the niggerism, the nigger mentality, the nigger cancer, huh? So we have to dig it back up. And where do we have to go to dig this up? If a body's buried in Maryland, you don't go to California to dig it up. If a body's buried in Arizona, you don't go to Massachusetts to dig it up. You go to where the body's buried specifically to dig that body up. Any old graveyard won't do. So if we look at these religious ideologies and doctrines that many of us are in graveyards, well, let's go to the greatest cemetery where we're all in, the nigger cemetery. We have to go into the nigger grave and dig us up out of the niggerism in order to rebuild, reshape, remold, reform, and create a new life in a spiritually, culturally dead people who are buried in negativity. That's where we have to go dig us up out of. So that's why I felt that the topic today of examining from a sociological standpoint and a historical standpoint and a clinical standpoint was the nigger mentality, one of our greatest enemies, that which is in our way as a group. It's responsible for more murders between us than the Ku Klux Klan, the police, and the Vietnam and the Korean War, all put together just from 1980 to now. The nigger mentality. We know who fuels it, but our ignorance allows them to keep fueling it and to dictate and to calculate and to determine the direct trajectory of how, when, and where it will land and the impact that it will have intergenerationally. We got to intercept that. That's what real revolution is. That's how the fight starts. Revolution starts within, and then it spreads abroad. You know what I'm saying? That's just my 2 cents for whatever it's worth. That's right. I'm gonna start an organization, Bobby. I'm gonna have to start a damn movement. It's gonna be called BAN, B-A-N, Blacks Against Niggers. You gotta ban these niggas. Can't bring that nigga shit in here no more. We're banning you. Blacks against niggers. And with that, Baba, I got a long day ahead of me tomorrow. I didn't even intend to be this long, but I had to be strong. I love the people for tuning in. I'm grateful always and honored and feel so privileged to be afforded and awarded your attention. And hopefully your attention was worth it with this segment of Baba TV. You know what I'm saying? And we got a lot more we're going to be bringing it to you. Sankofa Sundays is going to be on and popping. And once again, we got a hip hop legend that's going to be in the building very soon. So stay tuned. You know what I'm saying? Anything you want to close out with, Baba?
Yes, sir. Other than the fact that thank you, Sankofa. This brother, yes, came through with some good teaching. For some good teaching, and we can't go forward until you go backward. Sankofa. So thank you for coming on Baba TV always, and let's continue this Sankofa Sundays. This is some good teaching right here. This is some good teaching right here. Thank you, family, for tuning in always. And don't let me forget. Where am I at right here? Sankofa will be this Saturday coming up at the Alhambra Ballroom with my brother, big brother, Dr. and Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, and Captain Tezoyak of the mighty ISUPK. Come and just make fellowship, friendship, brothership, and as Kali would say, leave all the bullshit. Leave all the bullshit beside you. I didn't say the other one. I say ship. I said ship. Yeah, I said ship. Melchizedek is watching me, and he'll be calling as soon as we get off the phone, because I don't do the cursing. So
much respect and love to the elder. And if I did curse and you're watching, please forgive me in advance, my brother. I'm trying to work in progress. And a lot of respect for that, brother.
Yes. On that note, I want to say until next Sunday, family, peace and Black Power.
Black power.